Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, inviting you to join me on this journey. Some changes arrive quietly. Others arrive like a door closing behind you before you're ready. A job ends, certainty evaporates, and suddenly the version of yourself you were relying on no longer exists. Today's conversation is for anyone who has experienced that kind of rupture. Not just the loss of work, but the loss of identity, rhythm, and the story you thought you were living inside. My guest, Merry Korn, was fired just 2 months into a role. What followed wasn't a quick pivot or a polished comeback. It was fear. It was stillness. It was listening. And it was learning. And eventually, it became a life devoted to building work that actually fits the human being doing it. This episode is about what happens when life forces us to stop outsourcing our worth to our job and start asking deeper questions about purpose, alignment, and contribution. So let's begin, Merry. I start with Happy New Year and
Happy New Year to you.
welcome to Suddenly Different.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
It is an absolute delight. And such an important conversation, that sort of link between identity and job and security and fear.
Absolutely. They're all commingled together.
Yes. So the moment life became suddenly different for you, can you take us back to that moment when you were fired after only 2 months? Obviously shocked. So how did that moment feel? And, was there a disconnect between your body and your mind? What sort of happened?
Oh, Leigh-Anne, you just asked a really compelling question. And the compelling question has to do with, I took a job because it was who I was supposed to be. But it had nothing to do with my heart and my soul and my life mission. I went from one paycheck to another paycheck, one fairly high level position to another, without doing the most basic work, which was a deep internal excavation of who I am and what thrills me, what excites me, what's aligned with my heart and my soul. And so any of your listeners who've been fired, or you just feel like your job is like wearing two left feet or left shoes, it's so important to do the internal work to look at what is your life mission? What is your purpose? And I've done an incredible amount of work on myself with coaches and reading books and taking all kinds of assessments. And so in answer to your question, how did I feel when I was fired? I felt lost. I felt devastated. I was terrified. I was a single mom. And I literally woke up the next day and I had no source of income. I had no title. I had no email address. I woke up in ground zero, the land of ground zero.
Yeah. I can imagine, because I had the same job for a really long time, but I went through a constant feeling like being fired or made redundant was just round the corner. And my identity was so stuck in my job that it had more gravity, the potential of losing my job, because I thought my money and who I am, right? And I didn't separate myself from both those things, right?
Right.
And it sounds like you were the same.
Right. And the problem is, I found out that I left one job that had no meaning, no purpose, and I got another one that made me feel exactly the same way. I literally was at ground zero and more lost than you could possibly imagine. Or maybe you could.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's very difficult for anyone to fully understand what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes, right? We can try, we can care, we can be compassionate, but like standing in your shoes actually feels like I'm trying to do it right now. And it feels too painful to
Yeah.
go to that point and put those shoes on and imagine being a single mum. Where's the rent coming, or where's the mortgage coming next week? Where's the food coming from? How do I feel so bad about myself. How am I going to get another job?
What I do know is that the job I had before, I took the one that lasted 2 months. Both of them felt devoid of meaning. And then it wasn't because I tried to find a job and I couldn't. I simply could not find a job. And out of desperation, I started this business that turned out to be completely aligned with my heart of a social worker and my head as a businesswoman. So getting fired
Right.
was the best thing that happened. But Leigh-Anne, I built the business having done work with a career coach well before I was fired. And that career coach, after months and months of assessments and discussions and role plays, helped me realize that what I was meant to do and my purpose was to be a business owner of a company that had a for-profit social mission.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So I did that excavating. Yeah,
Once you know that, when you don't see that as the outcome, you can't do the job that's in front of you.
no, because it has to have meaning. And unfortunately, I think I read a Gallup poll survey that more than 64% of people working are not aligned with the work they do. That means the vast majority of people who are your listeners are not engaged and living these lives of desperation, quiet desperation, because they're not aligned with their purpose.
I would hazard to say that there's another percentage in those remaining number of people who think that they are aligned. They actually may be living so unconsciously that they don't know that they're not aligned,
Wow. Yeah.
right? So there was a period of time. I mean, I'm a highly intelligent woman. I've had a great career, but I didn't really understand values, things you would have done with your coach, right? I didn't understand what my purpose in life was and the meaning of my life or anything like that until I started looking at books and having coaching and things. And I'm sure that there are lots of people out there, even though lots of companies now educate on values and things, but it's the company's values. It's not the people's values.
Yes. Yes. And that's hard to believe that people don't understand what it is that's going on with them in terms of that lack of alignment. But it shows up in terms of the quality of the work or lack thereof.
Just the happiness, just their zest for coming to work, right? They can still possibly perform fine, do the task, like see the task as the task. But there's a difference between having an absolute zest and passion. Like when I would teach people about data and empowering them to use data themselves in their business to make their job easier, I was so passionate about that. It was
Yeah.
different to when I was doing something else.
Of course. Because you loved what you were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So when you lost your job, but you started this for-profit business, while you were in that transitional period, did you have anything show up in your body or in your nervous system or in your in your thinking where you were grappling between that world, the old world, and the new world?
My God, it was such a host of emotions. But I can tell you one thing that happened was my greatest. First of all, I was terrified for like 2 years straight, and I thank God that I was healthy, because anyone with
Yes.
a more tenuous disposition wouldn't have survived it. Leigh-Anne, both my parents were Holocaust survivors. And the reason I bring that up because my mother, at the age of 13, was incarcerated in a Bergen-Belsen, the same camp as Anne Frank. She jumped from a train car to escape the train that was destined to a death camp, and she escaped from the death marches. And the biggest thing that went through my head and my heart, because keep in mind, I'm starting a business, I still don't know when my first paycheck's going to come, was channeling this ferocious desire to live and survive. And I think that's what I was operating under, is survival at all costs. I have to keep moving forward. I cannot be weak. I have to forge ahead and start this business. And it turned out to be a business that I grew to 1,300 employees and had for the better part of 20 years.
Wow. Just looking at that, legacy, all the I've got so many things, like, just from that story of that, the tenacity that your mother had, and that is in your DNA, right?
It
You
is.
have all of that, but it's a choice to access it, and you chose to access that, which is, again, it just requires that bravery, that desire to live, that absolute desire to live and make a difference, because living without a purpose is not living.
No.
So with those 1,300 people that you had in your business, tell us some of the impact that you had, that you saw, you witnessed and saw on those people by you leading with the demonstration of all of you, a purpose-driven, tenacious, just intelligent, and I can't even find all the words. There's just so many words. The feeling I have, I cannot describe, of how I'm feeling about how you would have been, and I wish I worked for you. But yeah, tell me some stories about the people who worked for you.
Oh my God. So it's a long story. And how much time do we have?
Plenty, plenty.
Okay. I'll give you two examples. So I started doing what's called informational interviews. It's something my coach trained me to do. And the informational interviews, and this is for any listener who is lost and was in the position I'm in, or just dying to move on with your life. I had structured conversations with people, and the conversations I had was, I have skills in healthcare, I have skills in sales. Would you mind spending 20 minutes of your time with me to talk about how my skills and talents could transition to your industry? And I did this for 2 weeks straight. And out of the blue, one of the people I talked to was the head of a medical association. And he said, I don't have a job, but I need somebody to raise sponsorship dollars. And I knew I couldn't make a living and keep my kids. I couldn't afford to take care of my kids if I was raising money for sponsorship dollars, and then I had to hire people. So, Leigh-Anne, to make a long story short, I discovered by hiring people with severe disabilities who needed to work from home that I could find an untapped workforce, because most employers don't know how you hire people with the most severe disabilities, people who are blind or quadriplegic or paraplegic. So, Leigh-Anne, two quick stories. I hired this woman who hadn't worked in 10 years because she had MS and she was a quadriplegic. Her mother had to get her out of bed every day. She couldn't eat with a fork. She could only eat with a straw. that woman I put to work, and she sold $140,000 worth of sponsorships within the first 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, "I'm onto something." So I started hiring more and more people with severe disabilities. And in terms of the impact, I would have these Zoom meetings with people from all over the country, and many of them had been unemployed for years because employers don't know how to hire or how to keep people with severe disabilities. And then I had this epiphany. I attended a meeting about why government contracts are really good for women. And the answer is that the government, at least until our current administration, the government mandates that X% of government contracts have to go to diverse business owners. And what I was struggling with is the work with the associations were temporary jobs, meaning they would raise the money and a campaign would be over. And these people who hadn't worked in 7 years I'd have to put them on hold. So I was attracted to getting government contracts because they were good jobs, competitive wages, and benefits and career pathways. So in terms of this
Wow.
story, there's Linda, the woman who was quadriplegic, who hadn't worked in 10 years. The other story that's gut-wrenching is I hired a disabled veteran who came back from Vietnam, totally fine. He fell off a rooftop, he broke his back, and was confined to a wheelchair for 29 years. I hired him to do outbound calls for the insurance industry. And that man was so motivated to work that there were days he was too weak to get out of the hospital, out of his bed, that he had the rehab engineer put a hospital table over his bed so that he could still work. So I found my calling.
That is absolutely amazing because I know how difficult it is for people who don't fit into the box, right? They don't fit into the consistent availability box. They don't fit into the current open plan workplace setting. They can't use the same bathrooms. Like there's so many disadvantages for disabled people in the workplace, and I know that they're trying to make it better, but again, it's like me trying on your shoes to see how it felt for you to lose
Right.
your job. It is for disabled people, because there's such a diversity of disabilities, it is very difficult to understand the disabled condition. My conditions fall under the disability, so I am disabled, but I'm in rehabilitation to improve. But when I was really sick, I was completely reliant on others and unable to
Wow.
look after myself. And part of my biggest journey was the letting go of the ability to work, because in society, your ability to work is your identity,
Yeah,
isn't it?
totally. Most
Right? Because the
societies.
way it's structured.
Yeah.
And but for what you've given to those people who, because it was really easy for me to start getting into the identity of I'm disabled,
Wow.
and that didn't have a good feeling about it, right? It
No.
didn't have a purposeful feeling. It didn't have,
Right.
I would cry a lot about this new identity that I had. I had an identity of inability and weakness, and I didn't want that. And I know that all
Yeah.
other disabled peoples don't want that identity. They want to be contributors, to be purposeful, to
Everybody
to be
does. Everybody
included.
wants a purpose.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
part of being a human.
It is, but we forget, I think. I don't know whether I don't believe it's a conscious decision that we're making to, you know, treat ableism versus disability. Like, I don't think we're consciously trying to do it, but we do it anyway.
Yeah.
And then when people identify with their lack rather than identifying with their love.
Yeah.
So while you were running your business, did you get a lot of community support? Did you have to, as a lone wolf, go out and do this, or did you have people in your community and your family and friends supporting you with this endeavor?
All I know is that when I arrived at what my mission was, all these kind of almost divine coincidences happened that helped me along the way. Like my head of operations, she was a woman I'd worked with in a previous job. She had this incredible gift with technology that when I got a grant from the state of Ohio, she worked with a team of IT geeks in India to create a software system that enabled paraplegic and blind employees to do telephone work from home. And this is way before there was a concept of virtual employment. So, I mean, just finding somebody who had the wherewithal to develop technology that I could hire blind people and people with no use of their hands to work from home. And then this grant that I got, I didn't even look for it. The state came to me and said, "We have $80,000 we have to spend. We're not going to give you the money, but we'll give you whatever you need to do to keep growing the business." But Leigh-Anne, we didn't talk about that divine whisper or that spiritual hand, but I felt that more than any other support. The right people came along at the right time every step of this journey. And some of the wrong people came along and they taught me lessons too. Because sometimes you
And
make
that is
mistakes.
life.
Yeah.
And because often we don't learn from an easy path.
No, Leigh-Anne, I had a woman who was, I think she was in an HR position for a big, major global pharmaceutical. And I was pitching her on, "You should work with me." And she stopped me. "Oh, you should work with me because I give hiring opportunities to people with disabilities." And she stopped me dead in my tracks. And she said, "That is such a turnoff. I mean, I have no interest in how you're presenting what your business does." And I learned something really important, which is nobody's going to give me contracts because I hire people with disabilities. They're going to give me contracts because I hire people with disabilities who could do the job. And then when I decided to focus on the federal contracts, I tweaked my paradigm to focus on the fact that we gave hiring priority to disabled veterans first. And the reason I tweaked it is that I knew from a psychological standpoint, I'm dealing with Washington. I'm dealing with big major contractors. Everybody's involved with the military. Everyone has a son, daughter, child, father, mother, sister in the military. That if I twisted my focus by saying we give hiring priority to disabled vets, people with disabilities, that it would be a major turning point. And it was. Leigh-Anne, if government contracting is highly competitive, the fact that I gave hiring priority to disabled vets and people with disabilities who are skilled and talented to do the job, when hundreds of competitors were going for the jobs, the contracts, I got them because people loved my story.
So, with the levels of disability of the veterans, and my father was a Vietnam vet, so I understand that space personally. Did you not only work with the physically disabled, did you work with the mentally and emotionally disabled vets?
It wasn't just disabled vets, it was people with disabilities. I got a line of contracts. I was just talking to our IT about this right before this call. I got these contracts that required that we tweak websites and documents so that people with disabilities could read them. And it was the kind of contract that I wanted because the majority of my contracts were call center, but the work to do this manual work, people didn't have to have any interpersonal skills whatsoever. They could, we hired people who had Tourette syndrome and people who had a host of issues where they couldn't speak. And so I found these
Yes.
technology contracts that they could stand up because a lot of times people with disabilities, they can't sit too long. Disabled veterans, a lot of them because of PTSD, not all of them, but PTSD, they can't work with other people. They can't work in stressful environments. So yes, Leigh-Anne, we were lucky enough to get this whole host of work where they didn't have to talk and they didn't have to
That
engage with
is,
they it was amazing work.
I think that is so wonderful that because like it seems like you applied your business knowledge to your passion and then you were
Yeah,
able to and you saw
creative.
these people through your heart, right?
Yes.
And you gave them um, a way of making a difference, doing that job, you know, and be seen as they are,
Yeah.
which is so fantastic because oftentimes with especially with veterans, they don't know how to explain. They don't want to tell a big story. They don't but they need to work. The amount of money that
Right.
disabled people get if they
And then it's
satisfy a government thing is it's not surprising there's so many on the street,
I know.
you know. And yeah, so that is really amazing. Now, I gather that probably AI is having an impact on the offerings that you have. So have you got your technical people working on ways that can utilize AI to help your staff to even better do their job?
Leanne, I was fortunate enough, I grew the business and I sold it.
Right.
So, AI was just becoming much more present in the call center space. And I have to believe AI would give more and greater opportunity to employers that want to take my path because AI might liberate the disabilities that people have and let them be more functional because of technology. I mean, I had this great operations head who worked with IT teams in India that configured software that enabled somebody who had no use of their hands to do speech to text work and enabled people who couldn't read because they had no vision to have text to speech. I have to believe AI will only make that technology for people with disabilities better and greater.
I think those technologies are the basis of AI. And I know that for
Yes.
me, when I first started, I was very, very limited in my brain capacity. I wasn't, I couldn't remember what I knew about computers. And it took until probably version 3 of AI before AI and I started having a relationship. And I use it now because of my reading and cognitive difficulties and sometimes my speech. I use it to help assemble my thoughts, to be
Yeah.
all I can be.
Wow. Very cool. Leanne,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
I'm so glad I have sold my business because I climbed this big mountain and I live life at its fullest. I have to say I was given the gift of doing my life's work completely aligned with my heart, my mission, my values. But there's a part of me that misses what could it, if I had more leeway, all the things I could have done because I had always envisioned the company being global and having a global footprint. But I'm no longer with that business, but it was an extraordinary journey that I hope your listeners might find inspiring. What can happen when everything goes to ashes in your life? Vision and resilience operating from your heart and your soul. What can really be accomplished with just one person?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it takes one person to start, right?
Yeah.
To create a movement in any capacity, create it is one person. And coming from that beautiful heart space and accessing the wisdom of generations
Yeah.
that's available to us.
Yes.
So with your book, in your book, Faith, Guidance and Trusting the Unseen, So you talk about your spiritual and intuitive connections that help guide you. How is that guidance helping you today to access
Leigh-Anne,
this next path, especially when you're not, you know, able to express all the ideas that you have?
I'm so glad you asked that. You're the only person who asked me that, because I feel I have this mission to spread my message, to communicate to all the people who are lost, confused, like I was, li- that there's faith, and that if you just tune into the whispers, that the divine guidance will come. And so I feel like my journey right now is doing exactly what I'm doing with you, is this podcast, writing the book. I do workshops, I do speaking engagements. But, Leanne, throughout my journey, when I started building this incredible company till now, there are times I have such great doubt. And I wonder, am I good enough writer? And am I good enough speaker? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just not good at any of this. But I felt all that insecurity when I built the business. And to your listeners, you just have to keep going and put blinders on and just trust. So I loved your question, because I struggle too. I don't have all the answers.
And I don't think anyone has necessarily the answers for anybody else. They can say what they do for them. And there's lots and lots of programs out there that say, well, you tick this box and you follow this and you answer this question and you do this meditation and you say these words, right? But
Yeah,
we're all so unique. We all have unique fingerprints. We all have unique eyes. We all have unique souls. And
yeah,
and we all, like resonate with each other. But knowing that you are connected to something, right? It's
yeah,
something greater than you. The
yes,
universe, God, whatever it's called. We are atoms, right? We are electromagnetic energy fields. We affect each other. And, if the construction of the planet and that mankind and animal kingdom and all of that is that we're all completely linked because we're all just different density of atoms,
right,
well then, we are
right.
all in this together.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. I needed to hear that tonight.
Yeah, because, and that's where I know that there are moments when I'll sit and I'll think of someone and you are now part of my visual and energetic network, that I know that, there'll be influence from you that will come, and there will be answers of my questions that we don't even talk about that'll come to me
Yeah,
from you. Right. And don't you love it when that happens?
yeah,
Right.
totally. That
When,
synchronicity.
yeah. And when you're aligned and at different times when you're at different frequency of being, different thinking, different values, different missions, you have different people around you.
Yeah, the right people somehow show up that make
That's right.
amazing things happen.
Yeah. And your mum, as she was escaping from the train, she would have had the right people around her helping her get off that train and
She
getting
did. My
away,
sister was there.
right? Yeah. So
Yeah,
she had the people. So, her life, how she was being is not dissimilar to how we're being. We're all trying to survive. We want to thrive. We need
right.
each other,
Yes,
and we can choose to sit back and be stuck, or we can move forward.
yes, so
And
true.
yeah, and I feel so honored, like you sharing that story about your mum, because I don't know whether you're aware that in Australia there's been some difficult times and
I am
recently,
so
and
aware.
I'm so sad about it. And I think it is a really important time for us as as a planet to put these differences, these man-made differences aside and understand and connect to each other more.
Leigh-Anne, if only the major leaders of government understood that more.
Yes, yes. It's very sad. What stays with me from this conversation is not just what Mary built, but how she listened before building anything at all. Job loss can feel like failure, but more often it's just information, right? It's data for us to know that that wasn't the path for us. Information that sometimes no longer fits in our life. Information that your worth was never meant to be housed in that role. If you'd stayed in that role, your trajectory of life would have been completely different, and the
Would have been
magnificence and the would have been totally different.
so
So
true.
information that there is another way to contribute. So everybody has access to this information. One that just asks for you to do the work, look in the inner work, be more honest with yourself, and less proving to the outside world and more proving and evaluating and being in yourself. So if you're listening today and your life feels uncertain, fragmented, or even like me, suddenly different, I want you to hear this. You're not behind, you're not broken, and you're not lost. You're just standing on a threshold. And sometimes the bravest work we do isn't moving forward quickly and rushing to the next solution. It is actually staying present long enough to let the next true step reveal itself. So thank you, Merry Korn,
Thank
for
you.
your heartfelt contribution today. And thank you to the audience for listening to this important conversation about you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Charland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.